Stephen, some philosophers who believe in God, theologians, react against the new atheism, the militant atheism that we see today, by claiming that atheism itself is now a faith. What do you say about that?
Well, first of all, I'm wondering whether I fall into the category of a militant atheist.
Well, you look like a nice guy.
Do I? What I say is, it depends what they mean. And when people say atheism is a faith position, they may mean one of a whole range of things, actually, and some quite sophisticated, interesting things, but also some really silly things. So maybe let's start with the silly end of the spectrum. Okay, so sometimes you hear people say, well, atheism and theism, they're both positions because, well, you can't prove it either way, can you? Now, what does that mean? You can't prove it. You can't prove it beyond all possible doubt. Well, if that's what prove it means, then hardly anything can be known. Certainly atheism comes out as a faith position, theism. But then, so does belief that there are no fairies at the bottom of the garden. That comes out as a faith position. I mean, is that what they really mean to say? Probably not. So maybe prove it means prove beyond reasonable doubt. The notion of proof that you might find in a court of law. Okay. Now you can see that, well, maybe an atheist might be able to establish beyond reasonable doubt that there is no God. So let me use an analogy. Take the God hypothesis that there's an all-powerful and all-evil God, okay, behind the universe. Just the one God, and he created everything. All-powerful, supremely malevolent. Look around you. Is this the kind of world that such a being would create? There's far too much good stuff in the universe for this to be the creation of a supremely malevolent, all-powerful being. Overwhelming evidence, which is why no one believes in an evil God, or one of the reasons why no one believes in an evil God. Now, would we say, that's just a faith position? That your rejection of an evil God is just a faith position? No, I mean, it's not a faith position at all. We can establish beyond reasonable doubt that there's no such being. And so that might be true then of belief in a good God. I don't say it is true yet, but we should acknowledge the possibility that perhaps you could show that there's no good God in a similar kind of way. You could establish beyond reasonable doubt that there's no such being. And that wouldn't be any kind of faith position so far as I can see.
So what do you think are the good uses of the word faith position that some people would ascribe to atheism?
Right, well, I'm not sure that they're good, but they're more sophisticated.
Okay.
So you might say that, look, everyone starts with certain beliefs that they can't ultimately justify. Right. The chain of reasons and justifications must end somewhere. We all start with certain basic beliefs. And I start with the belief in God, and you start with the belief in, say, the reliability of your senses. So we're both, it's all square then. We're both making leaps of faith. It's leaps of faith all round.
As human beings, we open our eyes, we see what exists, and we have certain fundamental, basic beliefs.
Yeah, there are certain. Yeah, we all take certain things for granted, and the atheist is going to have to take something for granted. And perhaps what he takes for granted, or she takes for granted, is that there is an external world, and that his or her senses are a reliable window,
Right.
open window onto that reality. So we're all taking something for granted now. Well, that may be true, maybe. But it doesn't follow from that even if it is leaps of faith all round, it doesn't follow that atheism actually isn't far more reasonable, involves much less of a leap of faith. Because what if, when the atheist opens their eyes and looks at the world, they find abundant evidence that there ain't no God of the sort that the theist believes in? Then they really ought not to be believing in such a God. What if the theist looks at the world? They may say, well, look, as a theist, I don't have to assume my senses are reliable, because after all, I believe in a benevolent deity who underwrites the reliability of my senses. So they rely on their senses too, they trust them, but what if their senses reveal that there is no such God? then their basic assumption undermines itself. Their trust in God, their belief in God, leads them to trust their senses, but their senses reveal that what they originally took for granted is not true. Now, that is not the case when it comes to atheism. The atheist's assumption doesn't undermine itself. The theist's assumption does.
Well, it only undermines itself if you think when you look at the physical world, you don't get evidence for God. You're reading that into it. That's
I took that bit for granted.
Yeah, that's your leap of faith. That when you look at the world, you don't see that.
But now the theist then has to deal with the atheist's argument and not just play the faith card. It's not enough to say, oh, leaps of faith all round, because it may be leaps of faith all round, but it turns out that if the atheist is correct, the theist is making a much, much bigger leap of faith. Indeed, they are, because they start with a belief that undermines itself, and yet they continue to believe it. Now, that's irrational.
It only undermines itself if what you see in the world doesn't reinforce what you see. If what the atheist
can say, well, that's what they would now need to. The onus is now on them to show. You can't just play the atheist, the faith card. They have to show that atheism, that the senses don't reveal such evidence, which is precisely what the atheist in many cases will claim. So you can't just play the faith card. You have to deal with the argument. The faith card is just a smokescreen at that point.